Hello and thanks for joining me for this new video. Today we will build together PixaBricks. PixaBricks is a Pixabay clone. It will be our private stock image repository. It's built with bricks, of course, using Structizy and OxyProps, and the latest version of Structizy introduced support for Alpine.js, and this is the very lightweight JavaScript framework that will power our PixaBricks application. So we'll see together how to use it to query the Pixabay API and get all of these very nice stock images to use on our website. The application, of course, is dynamic. We can enter query terms. We can query several keywords. For example, if we want car pictures, we can query supercars. I want photos. Let's search and I get plenty of very nice cars. If I click on it, I get a larger picture in a modal. I can close it and open another one. We have a search field. We have a drop down to choose the type of image we want to get. And all of this is client-side application, meaning that it runs in your website visitor browsers. It doesn't use any of your WordPress server resources. Okay, so just before we start creating it, you will need a Pixabay API key. So if you don't already have one, to get your API key, you can go to the Pixabay website. If you don't already have a Pixabay account, you can sign up for free. You will get a free account. And once you are signed in, you click on the Explore button, API, Documentation, and then you get to this page. And if I scroll the page, here in the search image, this is the endpoint, very easy URL to remember. These are the parameters, and the first one is your API key, and you will find your API key here. So keep it somewhere safe. You can always come back to get it, but we will need it later to query the API. Okay, so let's start by creating a brand new WordPress website, and I will use my usual script that will create for me the WordPress website, the database, install the theme, the plugins, activate the license, and set up all my usual preference for various settings, permalinks, etc. Okay, so now I'm in WordPress and I have bricks installed. So let's simply add a new page. My new page will be PixaBricks. I'll publish it and edit with bricks. Okay, so the first thing we will do is a bit of setup. First, we will be creating an Alpine.js application. So we need to import the library. We need the core one. So let's add it to our page. Then I will create a code element. And this code element, let's clear what's inside of it. This will be a script tag. And inside of this script tag, I will add my API key. So I will define a constant API key, and this will be equals to, and you can paste here your own license key. Don't forget to execute the code, render without a wrapper, sign the code, and of course, don't leave it empty. Paste your API key, and we will be ready to go. Okay, so we have our API key, we have the core library. Next thing we will need, it's a root element. This will be the root of our application. To define an Alpine.js root component, it's simply done with a directive, which is the xdata one, that is added to the element. And let's modify the default value. And for now, we will simply create an object, and we create an object with curly braces, and we will define a property of images, and we will initialize it with an empty array. So a pair of square brackets. Okay, so that simply means that to start with, our images is empty. Okay, now let's start building our layout. So inside of my component, I will add a Structizy component, and I will add a section header centered. Perfect. And I will simply get the text from my demo. So this is my heading. This is my subheading, my description, and we are okay. We can add some classes if we want to. We can call it this one. And you know that for custom classes, I like to prefix them with the C. So I can easily differentiate with the framework classes that are prefixed with an O. So this will be our C-PixaBricks. Okay. And then we will have a C-PixaBricks _ title. Because I want to give it a bit of styling. As you can see, I did apply the defaults of the framework, and my heading has a limited width. And this is because we have a max inline size applied. For this specific usage, I want to get rid of it. So we can try to go to layout and set a max width to initial. And then we are back to the default behavior. While I'm here, I will modify my typography and I will use a font weight of 900. And that's okay. The first thing I would like to do is to apply a background image to what we can call our hero section. And this image, I want it to come from the API. And if I want it to come from the API, well, I will need to query images from the API. So that's what we will do now. We will go to our root element and go to our attributes. And besides the X data, we will add another attribute. And this will be the X-init. And this attribute defines a directive that will execute when the component initializes. The first time the component mounts on the client. So we will use a fetch function. That's what we use to query from an API. And because I want to build my query a string, including my API key from the constant I did define, I will use a template literal. So I will use two backticks and write my string just between those two backticks. So remember, this is https://pixabay.com/API/ and here we enter our query parameters, starting with a question mark. The first one is the key, and the key is equals to my constant. And to call my constant, I will use a $sign, a pair of curly brackets, and inside of the curly brackets, I will call my constant, my API key. And then I can chain my other parameters. The next one is the Q parameters for the query terms. And if I want to reproduce my demo, I will query wildlife plus cute. And I want an image type of photo. And I want a pair page, the number of image returned of 32. Let's start with 32. So this is the first part, fetching from the API. This is an asynchronous function that will return a promise. So we need to resolve the promise and we will use the .then. So we query, and when we receive the response, then parentheses, and inside of the parentheses with our response, we will parse the response because we are receiving an object. So we want response.json to get a JSON object from our response. This also returns a promise that will resolve. So .then once again. And after parsing our response, we will receive data. So with this data, we want our images. Remember the empty array to be equals to our data.hits. And if you wonder where those hits come from, well, if we go back to the API documentation, this is an example response. And in the response object, we have a total number of match, a total number of hits, and then we have our hits, which is an array with all of the images. So that's what we actually want to get, okay? Perfect. So now this will execute and we will have, it's not image, it's images. We will have an array with the images returned from the API and we can work with it. So let's imagine that we want to use one of the images as the background for our hero section. So let's go to our section and we will create an additional attribute and we will define our section style dynamically. And for this, we will use an Alpine.js directive, which is the xbind. So we can the xbind style. We could also use the shorthand, simply colon style. This would also work. And once again, I will use a template literal, double backticks. And I will say that my style is that my background will be, and this is CSS, we are writing, center, that's the position, cover, that's the size, and this will be a URL, and the URL of my background image will be my images, and then I need a $sign and curly bracket to use JavaScript. This is an array. I will pick the first element, so square bracket 0 dot, and back to my API documentation, I want to use the, let's take this one, the large image URL. Okay, so with this, I am setting my background image and I want to use the URL of the first item in my image array. Let's save and simply look at the front end to see what we are getting. Well, that's not too bad. It seems that it worked because I'm getting an image as the background of my hero section. So just to be clear about what is the logic when building such an application, a reactive application that's running in the client. When I load my page on the front end, I'm requesting from my WordPress server that will send me my bricks page. And this brick page doesn't contain any image. It contains the application, the Alpine.js application. And once it's received in the client, it will be initialized. And during initialization, it will query the REST API to get the images. And as we did bind the style attribute of the hero section to this background image, what we just did, well, when the image is received, the first one is used as the background image to our hero section. I hope this makes sense. If you have any questions, please ask in the comments and I will do my best to give you more information. Okay, so just to improve a bit our hero section, what I like to do is to add a gradient so the image fades with our page background. So let's do this and back to our attribute. You probably know that for the background CSS property, we can use multiple images. So I will use another one. It will be a linear gradient and my linear gradient will go to top from, and let's use RGBA 000 /0. Let's say 4. That will be 40% opacity to transparent. And this should add an overlay to our image with a gradient. And actually, I will not use this RGBA. I will use my prop, which will be var _o surface 1. So this will go from my background color to transparent. Let's save and check the front end. So I refresh. And this time I have my linear gradient from my surface 1 to transparent. And you can see that each time I refresh, I get a slightly different response from the API. So that's why I have various images. Okay, so now this works. Perfect. What we can do is create a grid to display all our images. So let's do this. So inside of my section, I add my header. I will add another component and I will use a 4 columns grid. So in my sections body, grid 4, this will create a responsive grid with 4 cells, we can see. And inside of this grid, I want to use the results from my query to create elements, images. You can think of it as a query loop in Bricks that would repeat your structure for each result in the query. So what we want to do is exactly the same for each image from our API request result. And to do this, we will use a special element. So I will go and get a template element. And the template element will create a template that will be repeated for each item in our image collection. So now it will be a bit tricky because Bricks is not able to render the template element on the canvas. So you are a bit blind when you do this. So a solution could be to define your image outside of the template so it's visible and then bring it inside of the template when you are ready with the style. But what we want to do is quite simple. So let's first start with our template. So the template has two attributes. The first one is an X4 that will create the loop. And we will say that we want to repeat for each image in our images. Okay? So we'll go through the images collection and use the image one by one. And then we will define a key. And the key will be, let's have a look at the API. It will be my ID, my image ID, which will be unique. So it will be my image.id. When you use a reactive JavaScript framework like Alpine.js, that's the same with React, for example, when you repeat an element, you need to give it a key so the framework is able to identify the item. Because one of the benefits of such a framework is that it updates the DOM, the elements in the page, reacting to a change in the state of our application. But instead of refreshing everything and rebuilding everything, it updates only the one that needs to be changed according to what did change in the state. And the key will be useful to identify, it's a unique identifier of each of the elements in our loop. Okay, so with this, our template will repeat for each image. And then I will create a new element. So I want it to be an image, but I will use simply a container as a basis. So this will not be a div, this will be an image. Let's say that will be the thumb. This will have a custom tag of image, img. And this will have attributes. So let's get rid of this one. And once again, we will bind our attributes to values. So we want our source, the source of our image. And this will be our image dot, let's get back here. We want the large image URL. And the other attribute, we will bind the alt for the image and to the image dot, and we will use the tags. Okay, so if this works correctly, when looking at the front end, we should see our image template repeated for each image in the collection. So let's go to the front end, refresh. And that's perfect. We have our grid with all of our images. But something's wrong, of course, with the section. So let's go back and fix this. And what I will do, I will simply duplicate this, remove my grid from the first one, remove my header from the second one. So now I have two sections, one with the header and the background, the other one with my grid. Let's check. Okay, that's perfect. And I simply need to remove the background image from the second one. So this one has no attributes and no ARIA label. Okay, and this is what I wanted to achieve. Okay, so now let's give a bit of styling to our images. I want them to be square, so I want to constrain the aspect ratio. And I want to use round corners on it. So let's go to our image. We will create a class, so that will be c-PixaBricks __ thumbnails. This will have an aspect ratio of 1, border radius. So let's link them all together, and I will use a radius of 3. Okay. So something's missing. You see that all our images are squished. So a simple way to solve this would be to get rid of the aspect ratio here and to use a utility class O-square. And this will take care both of the aspect ratio and the proportions. And now it's perfect. I wouldn't use the utility class if I had to apply it to a lot of images, but because we are inside of a reactive application, we are defining a template, and the template would be repeated. And that's good because we have only to define it once at the component level. We can think of the template as a component. And of course, it will be automatically repeated for each of the image. So if we want to change the aspect ratio one day, we have a single place where we need to change it. Maybe it can be nice also to add a bit of visual effect. I will add an entrance transition. I will use the O-appear on enter, and let's check the result. Okay, and you can see that when we scroll down, we have this slight animation effect with the image fading in and rising up while they enter the viewport. Okay, so that's nice. We have our request, we have our images. So maybe what we can do now is take care of the modal and what happens when we click on one of the images. So let's close our sections and take my root. And here I will use the parser because this will be simple for me to create the structure. And what I want to do is create a dialog element. Inside of this dialog element, I want a div. And inside of this div, I want an image element. And let's for now simply create this and parse and inject my element. So now I want to update my root state. I have my images. For now, it's pretty simple, but if we try to develop and have a bit more complex applications, working with it inside of the attribute field won't be very easy. So what we can do is take it from here and place it. Let's create a new code element. And this will be my app data. Let's create a script, and I will create a function const PixaBricks equals parenthesis arrow curly bracket, and this will return an object, and this object will be my X data. Okay, so for now we have only our images. Let's execute my code, render without wrappers, sign my code. Okay, and if I go back to my root, my X data, instead of defining everything inside of this, I will simply call the function I just created, so PixaBricks, with a pair of parentheses to call the function. And if I did three things properly, this should still work on the front end. Let's check. And it works. Okay. So now it's easier to work inside of this code element. So I have my images. I will add a new property that will be my modal is open. And this will have a default value of false. And I also want to store my current image. And this will be an empty object. Sign the code, save, and now we can start using it. So let's first start with the dialog element. We will need some attributes, and the first one that we will add is a reference. So we want an xref, and the reference directive is used to reference the object in the page DOM. This will save us things like document.querySelector.etc. We will be able to reference the element by its ref, and the value will be simply modal. And then we want also to add a listener. So on colon click, and on click we want, and that's why we will use the ref, we will use the magic $ref.modal, that's the name we just created, as a ref.close. Close is a method that exists on a dialog element. Okay, so that means that we reference our dialog by the name modal, and we add the listener on click to call the close method on the dialog. Pretty simple. I will create a class for it that will be my C-. Pixabay _ modal, and I will give it dimensions, a width of 90 VI and a height of 90 dVB. I also want it to be position fixed with a top of 5 dVB. Okay? Now let's take care of our div. This one will be simply a wrapper inside of our dialog. So this will be c-PixaBricks wrapper. This will have a width of 100%, and height of 100%. It will have a display grid, and I want to place item centers. So that's the short for justify item center, align items center. Okay. This will be center everything inside of it. And then I have my image. This will be my c-PixaBricks _ image. This will have a width of 80 VI, an height of 80 dVB. And actually, that's not height, max height, and the max width. And then my attributes. So it's not the source directly. We will bind the source attribute to our current image dot. And I'm using the large image URL. And my alt will be current image dot tags. Okay? But for now, remember, in our app data, our current image is empty. There's nothing inside of it. So let's go back to our grid and our template. And inside of our template, we will add, actually we want a button, but this one is a text button. We want a container, and we will slide our image inside of it. So we want our whole image to be a button. So this will be a custom tag of button. So let's change this. Button, image, button. Okay. And this will have attributes. And this will be on click, not on click outside. On click, we want our current image to be equal to image. So remember, here we are inside of the template, the repeater. We are repeating for each image. So image will be equals to the individual image object for each of the thumbnails. So when we click on one, we want to set our current image to the current image on the thumbnail we are currently working on. Okay, but we also want to open the model, but we don't want to do it immediately. We want to wait for Alpine to have updated the state. Otherwise, we will not show the current image. So to do this, we will use the magic. So the magic, it's a $sign, next tick with a pair of parentheses, and then next tick, meaning when the browser refreshes after having updated all of the state elements. So what do we want to do? We want our ref.modal.showModal, and this is a function that exists on any dialog element that will open the model. Let's save and try to see what happens on the front end. So obviously we will have things to fix with the styles, but I have a pointer, meaning that it seems to be interactive. So let's click, and this opens a model with the big picture. And if I click on it, it closes. Opens, close, opens, close, opens, close. So it's working as expected. So for our button, we simply need to fix the background and give it a class, c-PixaBricks _ button. And we simply want the background to be transparent. And this is perfect. Okay, so maybe a last thing we can add is an hover effect, and we can add it to the button. We can use, for example, the O-pulse on hover. Okay, so now we have a feedback when we are hovering our images. Okay, so this works. Last thing we need to do is to add a search bar to be able to query different images from our API. Okay, so let's go back to the first section, and inside of this section, we have a header. We will add a component, and this will be a section body. I will use a flex row centered. this will be my search bar. And actually, no, this will not be a flex row center. Let's get rid of this class and let's create a custom one, c-PixaBricks __ search bar. This will be a display grid, and I will use a template column of auto, 1FR, auto. Okay, so I will create 3 elements, a button, a select, and an input. Once again, I will use the parser. This would be much more simple. So I want a button plus, to create siblings, an input with the type equals search, plus a select with options. So let's enlarge this. My button, my input, my select. We'll take care of the attributes later. My first value will be all, auto, illustration, and with a lowercase, and vector, and vector. Okay. And we get our elements. Inside of my button, let's add an SVG. I will use the carbon icon set, and I will search for a search. Okay, that's a magnifier. That's exactly what I want. So here it is. So this is my c-PixaBricks __ search icon. This is my c-PixaBricks __ search input. This is my c-PixaBricks __ select. Okay. And it seems that my grid is not working. Okay. That's because that was not correct. Now it's okay. Okay. So a few things there are buttons. So let's give this one, our search icon, an aspect ratio of 1. A display of grid, center, center. So our icon is centered. I will go to my search bar. My search bar will have a background. My background will be white, the responsive white. And actually, I didn't select the class. Let's select the class, background, white. I also want to give it a border radius. And my border radius will be round. Okay. Back to my button. My button will have a background, and I should add the transparent keyword to this menu. This will be in version 2. I want it transparent. Perfect. Okay. My SVG is a bit small, so let's modify the width and height. So actually, let's change at the search bar level the typography, because everything is dimensioned with the font. So the font size, let's enlarge it. Okay, this one, and it's better like this. Now let's take care of our input. Our input has a type of search. Okay, let's add a placeholder with a value of search for pretty images, for example. Perfect. And okay, let's use CSS because this will be a bit tricky. I will show you why. Let's go to the front end. Okay, so we have our button, we have our search input, we have our select, working pretty well. Okay, but you see that we have a border and we also have the outline, and that's not what I want. So I want to get rid of this outline on the input itself, and I would like the outline on the overall element. Okay, and we have something to work with on the input also here. So first, this one. Okay, so root, I will target the root and I will simply add a border of none. And then I will use CSS nesting and I will add an ampersand, column, focus visible, and I want an outline of none. So let's check, and it probably will not work. Okay, it doesn't. And this is a question of specificity. So here is a trick you can use, because you probably would be tempted to add an important. here, but important is evil. Never use it. We have other solutions for that. And another solution is to bump our selector specificity. We will use an is function, and we will use a specific property of the is function that takes the specificity of the selector in the list with the highest specificity. And so if we want to bump the specificity, we can create a fake ID. So let's create an ID, and I will call it fake ID. And this should bump our specificity. Let's check if this works. Okay, and you see that I have no border and no outline this time. Okay, so now let's take care of our select, and we will do something similar. So let's take our select. Okay, check the front end, and that's perfect. We have no border, no outline. We'll keep the outline on the button. Maybe it's square. It would be better to have it round. So let's take our button and give it a border radius of radius round. Perfect. And then our search bar. Let's go to the style, CSS, and we will use our root and add a focus within pseudo class. So when there is focus inside of it, we want an outline of 2 pixel solid var, and let's use our brand color. And I also want an outline offset of 5 pixels. Let's look at the front end. So when I focus inside of my search bar, I have an outline and I don't have my offset. So I probably did misspell something. It's outline offset, save. Okay, and now I have my offset. And if I focus, I still have the outline also on the button. Okay, so now we have a search bar, but it's not yet functional. So the last thing we need to do is to add the features to the search bar. And for this, we will go back to our application data. And actually, modal is open is not needed. We have used the native dialog method. So let's sign the code. And I will need a few other elements. First, I will need remember when we place a query, we give parameters to the query. So I will need a queue, and I will initialize it with an empty string. I will need an image type. That's what we will get from the select. And once again, let's start with empty. I will need a page if I want to search multiple pages. Remember, we have a limit of 500 per page. I want a per page, and here again, I can fix my limit. We could imagine to give the user a parameter to fix it, but let's fix it to 200. And then I need a function to query. So query images, and this will be an async function. And now let's define our function. So remember earlier we did use the fetch .then syntax. Here we will use a different syntax. We will use async await. So we will await for our response. So our response will be equals to await fetch. And once again, we will create our template literal https://pixabay.com/API/ key and this is our API key, E with an E, and Q equals, and we want to access the Q here, and to access Q inside of the same object, we'll use this dot Q, and our image type will be equals to this dot image type, and okay, and our per page will be equal to, you guessed it, this dot per page, and I think that's it. So then when we get our response, our data will be equal to await response.json, and this dot images equals data.it. So you see that's a different syntax, but that's exactly what we did earlier with fetch, with our URL, dot then with our response.json gives us a data, dot then with our data, this images equals data.it. It's a different way to write the same thing in JavaScript. Okay, so now we have our values, our properties, and we also have our query function. So let's start with the button, and the button will have an attribute, and this will be an X on click. And on click, we simply want to query images. That's the function we just created. And my signature is invalid. I need to sign it. Okay, query images. That's this function. Save. Back to my button, query image. Okay, then my input. So it has a type of search, a placeholder. I can also give it a name of search. I will bind its value, the XModel directive, and I will link this to my queue, which is the search query. And I also want to add an event listener, an XON column, key down, dot enter. So when the user press enter in the search input, I want once again to query my images. Okay? And last thing we need to take care is our select. So the first one has a value of all, a value of photo. I'm just checking because I've seen a value of vector and a value of illustration. So that's correct. And so back to the select, it has a name. Let's give it a name of select. And I will also give an XModel, and I will link this to the image type property. Okay, so if I did everything correctly without spelling mistakes, going back to the front end and refreshing, I should now be able to query something else. So let's try to get our supercars. Enter. So of course it doesn't work. Probably something's wrong in my query string. So let's go back here. Okay, and I have a question mark missing. Sign code. Save. Is this the only mistake? Image type, per page, queue. Okay, the rest looks okay. Let's check the front end again. And this works. I can query supercars. I can query healthy people. I can query scuba diving. Our hero image updates accordingly. If I want only illustration, I get only illustration. If I want only photos, I get only photos. So that's it. That's how we did create an application using Bricks, StructEasy, OxyProps, and Alpine.js. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you liked it. I hope you were able to reproduce this on your side. Let me know in the comment. Of course, like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you don't have purchased your license yet, well, purchase StructEasy, purchase OxyProps, and well, have fun, build awesome components with Alpine.js, and I'll see you in the next video.